Hello, and welcome back to Poly Plus and More equals Us. Today is the second episode in our 3-part mini-series about the book Sex at Dawn. So basically, we're just going to continue the conversation right where we left off. So Mike and I recorded this entire conversation all in one go, and it ended up being almost 2 hours. So we were like, okay, I guess we're going to split this up. But I mean, there was so much to say. And the book is just so fascinating. So if you haven't read it or if you're curious about it, then I can't recommend it enough. So I guess that's kind of it. Let's just hop right into the episode, picking up right where we left off. But, so you haven't gotten to this part in the book yet because you haven't finished it. But at the very end of the book, they talk about how swinging became a thing. And I didn't know the history of this. And again, I was like, wow, that is so beautiful. So swinging came about in, I think during World War II, I think it was. There were the fighter pilots in World War II had the highest mortality rate of anybody. And so it was kind of this known thing that okay, when we go out, 1 out of every 3 of us isn't going to make it back. That's huge.
Yeah.
Right? That is huge. And so what they started doing is they would have these parties where all of the men who were part of that squadron or whatever, and their wives, they would all come together and have these parties where everybody could sleep with everybody. And the idea was that knowing... Wow, I'm getting really emotional right now. I was not expecting that.
What the heck? That might be the most random one I've ever seen.
I just think it's so beautiful because it's oh.
Yeah, there's something like imminent death to focus your priorities.
Well, no, but really, it's because these men knew that one of their brothers was about to die. And they knew that it could be them. And they wanted their wives to be taken care of. And so the idea was that if everybody slept with each other and built these bonds that were so close, that when that man died, it was okay because he knew that the other men who survived were going to take care and provide for his wife and his family. And those bonds were solidified because they had built these relationships. Yes, intimate, emotional relationships, but also physical. The physical helps bond us. And I think that's so beautiful. And I had no idea that
Yeah. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah, I had no idea that that's how swinging started.
Yeah, that's
you know, it was through the military, with men knowing that they're gonna die and not be able to provide for their families. That's so beautiful. But so it's that idea, right? That having these intimate relationships, emotionally intimate and also physically intimate relationships with other people, bonds the community together. And that's the piece that's missing, right? Because, we can have our little commune and everyone's in their own nuclear families and we all share and help out. But it really is that intimacy piece that really solidifies these social bonds. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that throughout the book in the bonobos as well, for the exact same reason. And in all of the different civilizations that they look at that still exist now that are hunter-gatherer, it's the same thing. Those those physical relationships help solidify those bonds.
Yeah, and I think modern society nowadays, like just from the stories and the stats, there's like a lack of like human connection and intimacy.
Yeah.
I remember they give a stat about like Japan, because I guess it's the most probably like prevalent, but there's like a really high suicide rate amongst men, because and probably women too,
Yeah.
just because of like they literally like work themselves to death, and like they just don't have like balance. They don't have like intimacy in their lives.
Yeah.
And so it's just work, work, work. So I mean, that's definitely a cultural thing for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, this is all a cultural thing.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is a cultural thing.
Yeah, but that's like kind of the extreme of it, like not like straying so far from like what makes us happy, like what makes us human.
Yeah.
It just has like such terrible side effects like on our mental well-being.
Yeah. Oh, and also in these other cultures, like in modern hunter-gatherer cultures, there's like, it's crazy. There's like nobody, they're like, what is anxiety? What is depression?
Yeah.
What is cancer?
Yeah.
Like, none of that stuff exists.
Oh yeah, they did bring up those stats. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty remarkable. So heart disease.
Oh, sorry. That was kind of loud. That was a motorcycle.
Yeah, there's like no like pretty much all of the prevalent diseases in Western culture just don't exist.
Exactly. They do not exist.
Yeah.
Because people are free to pursue pleasure in any way that they want. And they also just they don't have stress because they know they're going to be taken care of by their community. It's just
I remember
crazy.
seeing that. I remember seeing that firsthand when I studied abroad in Nicaragua. That was like the first time I'd ever like witnessed something like that. Because like I ended up going to Bluefield. It's on the east coast of Nicaragua, and it's like a pretty poor area. And I mean, we took like a 3-hour mule ride and like a 2-hour boat ride.
Your mule ride.
Yeah, I mean, it was like we were like out in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah.
Right, and so they had like corrugated steel, like little houses they had made, and like fences made with like carved tree trunks and like barbed wire. So it was pretty primitive. But I remember just walking around, and like there was like relatively big households with like probably multi generations of family. And so they were pretty big, and they each had like their own cattle and their own like farmland and like crops and whatnot. Like nothing huge, but like I just remember walking around though, and everyone was just so freaking happy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, like I thought like my like young naive first impression was like, oh, these people must be so sad, they're so poor. But then walking around, I'm like, all these dudes are just like so jacked because they've been doing physical work their whole life. Like I thought I was
so
strong.
jacked.
I thought I was strong. I like went to pick up my suitcase, and this guy does it like no problem. He's
Yeah.
just been doing physical work his whole life.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh crap, okay. Like this guy's like got like next level strength because he's just been like working the land his whole life.
Yeah.
And but yeah, and they all just seemed so happy, and they were so kind, and I was like, wow, like it kind of like kind of shook me.
Yeah.
And, like woke me up from like what I thought was happiness, I guess, at
Yeah.
the time. And yeah, I remember like it was just so striking and just like so eye opening.
Yeah.
To witness that firsthand.
And did you see like how the community was like, just that like everybody sort of took care of everybody?
Yeah, I mean everyone took care of each other. I mean, so like it's interesting because it's almost like it's like the dichotomy between like Western highly like advanced technologically civilization versus like the primitive like communal based civilization, right? They're like two extremes.
Yeah.
Because like the whole reason we were there was to help them build a schoolhouse because they didn't have like enough resources. Like they were living very like primitively and poorly, but they were like very happy and content
Yeah.
because they had a strong community. They all knew each other. They all took care of each other, but they were still, they didn't have like a lot of clean water, and so like, they were like, there were a lot of threats to their health.
Yeah.
So it's just like interesting to compare like kind of the two extremes, and then I guess for me just trying to figure out like my personal goals, like figure out like where do I want to be amongst all of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's definitely it's thought provoking. It makes you like kind of rethink
Yeah.
everything you thought was like normal or right.
And they talk about in the book too, like, I forget which civilization it was, but like they took some of the men and brought them back to, I don't know, England or somewhere. I don't remember where. And they were like, we're going to teach you how to be civilized.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And so these men lived in, I guess we're just going to stick with London for now. Like lived in London, let's say, for I think a year.
Yeah, it was a year.
Yeah, for a year. And then were taken back to their own word.
Oh, their own, like, civilization or
Yeah,
tribe?
yeah. I was like, what? All of a sudden, I'm like blanking. Yeah. And so then they were taken back and then given the choice of, okay, do you want to stay here, you know, where you're from, or do you want to like live out the rest of your life in London?
Also,
And
hold
it
on a
was
minute.
like,
So they were brought to London to, like, be taught
Yeah.
the ways of civilized society and
Yes.
then bring it back to their civilization to
yes,
teach them.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. The idea was to teach,
Yeah.
you're right, was to teach their civilization.
Yeah.
And so they did. They brought them back and they were like, okay, great. Now you teach your people and we'll see you in like another year.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
It's like, yeah, teach them everything we taught you and, like, then you'll be civilized.
Yeah. And so then they came back like, you know, a year or two later and everything was like still the same. Nothing had changed.
Yeah.
And so then they asked the men like why didn't you teach them? Or like don't you want to come back? Wasn't it better? And the men were like, "No."
Yeah.
No. We don't want to live that way. They were like, "You were so like everything was so wrong with your culture and your society." They were like, "We are happy where we are." And it was really funny. Like, I wonder, I don't know where the quote is, but it was like,
Yeah.
here we have like,
I remember, yeah.
oh, you remember it?
It's yeah, so essentially, like, the three men go back and, like, they try for, like, a very short time period, maybe, like, let's say, like, a week or two.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is just not working for us. So, like, they abandoned everything within, like, a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And just went back to, like, their tribe's ways because that's, like, what they knew. That's what made them happy.
I found it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Some were, like, the little.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
they were asked like why
Plenty.
yeah, why don't you want to come back like to London or like live this way or whatever? And they say, why work so hard when there are so many Mongongo nuts in the world? Why stress over weeding the garden when there are plenty fish, plenty fruits, and plenty birdies? But I love that quote, and they come back to that quote many times throughout the book because it's like so true. They're like, we came to London and everybody was so stressed out about their work and their job and like all these crazy social things, and like why would we want to live that life and be so stressed out when we can live here and be happy and seek pleasure and live our lives the way we want to without judgment from other people, and where there's so much like food and water and resources, and you guys over there are fighting over resources all the time and hoarding your resources. Why would we ever want to live like that? And yeah, I read that and I was like, yeah, why are we living like that? Why are we doing this? You know, it's just, yeah, it's so crazy. And so exactly, like they are so much happier than we are because they're living life in a way that isn't stressful, but it's also because they're not hoarding. They're not living in these crazy capitalistic societies that, you know, teach you to just like work and spend your money and, you know, and hoard your resources. And like, that's like the measure of success in our society right now is to like, how many resources can you get? Like, look at fucking the Amazon guy. What's his name?
Jeff Bezos?
Yeah. He's like, how much is he worth? How many billions? Doesn't even matter. You could not spend that much money in like 10 lifetimes. Who needs billions upon billions of dollars? That is just hoarding resources. When you can share that, and then everybody can be happy and live happy, fulfilling lives. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? But like, these societies, they know that. And they're like, yeah, y'all are stupid.
There are some attempts like in Western culture to like, enact some of these beliefs and these values, and like sometimes, I mean, like, yeah, like charity, or like
Yeah.
it's like the Bill Gates like foundation, or like their initiative where they want like super wealthy people to donate like what 85% or whatever of their wealth.
Or like the guy who owned Patagonia.
Yeah.
That is like the perfect example of how you take all of that wealth and redistribute it for people who need it.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is like that's just not going to work when you're living in a society that is teaching you that success equals like hoarding, essentially. Right? It's like, oh, the more money I get, the more power I get, the more land I get, the bigger house, the better car, all of these things. And then like that's what makes me successful. And I'm going to get all of these things and hold on to them for just myself while other people are suffering. Mm-hmm. That is success. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean and it seems like it's just getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Like in modern society, like the what is it? Just like the income differential between like the wealthiest and like the average.
Yeah.
And the poorest is like just getting higher and higher.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like hoarding amongst the wealthy for greed, power, control.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Combination of those. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because it's also like, I mean, in my own life, like I've like highly valued like accomplishment and efficiency and like achievement, and yeah, like attainment of money. I've never really been into like material goods, just money.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the point in having all the money if you're not going to spend it on things?
No,
That's literally the definition of hoarding.
Oh, for me, it's experiences and like an opportunity. For me,
well,
it's like,
I know. It's like, but if you're not going to spend it on anything, I don't mean material things.
Yeah.
I just mean spend it on anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as I've lived my adult life now, I'm just like reevaluating all that. Like, no, like what's truly important to me, like, are my friendships and my relationships, and like, yeah, spending all my spare time just like pursuing like accomplishment and like the attainment of money.
Yeah.
Like, no, I need to find a better balance there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's why reading books like this, where it's like, yeah, these are like, this is where like we come from. This is like what is normal for, our species. And like, this is what made us happy. And, we were super healthy. We never had really any of these diseases.
Yeah.
I remember they were talking about, it's like a big part of the standard narrative was like that prehistoric men and women were like very brutish and like aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like 3 feet tall. Which is funny because they were like,
yeah, they were like 6 feet tall.
Malnutrition, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did the math. They're like, the average person was, because there was a lot more infant mortality.
Yeah.
And so when you average out like the height of an infant who died with like the average adult, it comes out to 3 feet.
Yeah.
But the average adult was like the same height that
it was
we
really
were.
Like
same average height.
No, higher than that. They were like all like 6 feet.
I think, yeah, they said 6 feet. I mean, the average man is what, like 5'8"? So yeah, a little bit
5'9".
taller. Yeah.
So
like relatively the same. But yeah, a little bit taller.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because I think a point I wanted to make earlier, but I didn't bring it up at the time, was like, there's like a huge difference between the chimpanzee and the bonobo, right? So like, as you were saying, like the chimpanzee was studied early on because there were a lot more chimpanzee groups that were easier to study and follow.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, the chimpanzee and the humans descended from the same like ape ancestor, they were literally only comparing the chimpanzee and the human. Yeah. Saying like, oh, like our ancestors must be like highly aggressive. And even though chimpanzees are non-monogamous.
Yeah.
Right? But they're very like power driven and power hungry. So like, yeah, they're non-monogamous, but they have sex purely for like power and for like reproduction.
And they kind of like form like little gangs,
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you can definitely see those traits in like humans, right?
Uh-huh.
The pursuit of power. It's all like a lot of male aggression, a lot of male fighting,
Yeah.
territory wars.
But that happens because like when a chimp, right, like if this is wrong, tell me, but right, wasn't it that like when chimps, they would like mate with females and then that female was theirs, and so they would have one male with multiple females, and so because there was limited, so then like the females become like this limited resource.
No, that's the gorilla.
Ah, damn
Yeah.
it. Okay, that's
Yeah.
the gorilla.
The gorilla has the harem.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's
That's
why
why
their
they're so
penises
big.
are so
Yeah.
tiny.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
get into that.
But yeah, so no, the chimpanzees, like, it's fascinating because chimpanzees and the bonobos are practically opposites, right? And so the bonobo, on the other hand, there was a really small group of them I think in Africa somewhere.
Yeah.
And because there weren't as many of them, and like they just weren't well known,
Yeah.
they weren't studied earlier on, and so it was really only like the human chimpanzee comparison. But once the bonobos were discovered,
Yes.
they're like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
They're very kind, like very like coordinated and like complex social structure,
Yeah.
like multiple male, multiple female relationships, and yeah, I mean it's just like they're almost like the I mean I don't know, there might be like other things that like they didn't quite discuss in the book, but they kind of
Yeah.
make the bonobo seem like this very like I don't know, like prime example of a species almost.
Yeah. Well, but they are. They are the prime example of how living in a non-monogamous community can work. They are like literally the perfect example. And they are also the most closely related to us humans. So it makes sense. It's like, look, they're literally like the living example of what we could be if we wanted it,
Yeah.
you know?
But I mean, yeah, I guess I see like in humans, you see like all of the traits of the chimpanzee and the bonobo.
Yeah.
Like the bonobo is more like altruistic, like group oriented, like almost like this is like one big happy family and we're all in it together kind of
Yeah.
thing. Whereas like the chimps are like, oh, like it's all about me and my pursuit of power. Like that's why the men are like so stressed out. Like the male chimpanzees are like always stressed and like erratic.
Yeah.
Because they're like it's all about power struggles,
Yeah.
and so it's just fascinating to like that. And both of those extremes exist in humankind. It's just
Yeah.
like those battles are just so much more complex because we have so much more complex minds.
Yeah. But also like look at, so like Western society has sort of like turned into the chimpanzees, and then these modern hunter-gatherer societies are like living the bonobo lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's turned into.
Yeah. It really has. And the things that make people happy, like within Western culture, are more just of returning to like the bonobo, the hunter-gatherer,
Yeah.
like communal, open lifestyle.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, it's fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
But none of that was really, like none of that's really been talked about until like
No.
recently, until like this book, until like these authors like reviewed all of this research
Yeah.
and like kind of pieced
Well-
it all together and was like, oh, this isn't the story that we've been told, like
Yeah.
through these like evolutionary
The last like
psychologists.
200, 300 years.
Yeah, like the evidence doesn't really support that. Like they were
Yeah.
trying to like form fit the evidence into what they believed, as opposed to letting the evidence tell them what.
What's that called again? Confirmation bias?
Yeah, confirmation
Yeah.
bias. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the research with the bonobos, I think, didn't start until like the 80s or the 90s even. So that research is super new when you think about all the other research that's been available. And so I think that's also why. But also like the standard narrative has been around for so long and it's been accepted that like people don't even realize like it's just ingrained in them now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
ingrained in us, and we're taught it, and we're like, yeah, that makes sense, because like that's what we see. But like this new information just hasn't really, I don't know, been disseminated, I
Yeah.
guess, or like
It's ingrained in
all of
the
our
movies,
society.
TVs, podcasts now, and in like any like in all of our stories. It's been
Yeah.
so ingrained
Yeah.
for so long, but I think with with books and with TV shows and new podcasts coming out, like there's a lot of rethinking of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
what really is standard, what is normal.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what this book is looking at.
Yeah.
What is normal? What was it like for our ancestors thousands of years ago? And are we still living in a way that's like in alignment with like our true nature? I guess,
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so interesting. And so after reading this book, it's like, whoa, we have strayed so far away from what should be or could be considered natural for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because they flip some things on their head, and like the writers and the authors are like really clever and like humorous.
Yeah.
But yeah, they flip a lot of things on their head. They're like, oh, if our ancestors like grew up in these like more open like multi relationship settings, like it's more human to be like promiscuous.
Yeah.
Where people would think that's like animalistic or like like a lower like civilized form.
Yeah.
But that's like more human than animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's natural. It is a natural thing that comes up in us. Anything that naturally happens within our bodies is not a bad thing. But like that's like where religion has come in and taught us that like, so many religions are like, sex is bad, don't do it. And like we've been punished. I love one of the things they say is that like for like 2,000 years now, religions have been punishing people through like stoning or even through death for having sex like outside of marriages or outside the bounds of whatever the religion deems appropriate. So if this has been happening for 2,000 years, if monogamy is natural, then why for 2,000 years have people been dying for having sex with other people? You know what I mean? It's like if this was natural, we wouldn't need to be punished by death to conform to it, or to like follow the rules.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that it's like, oh yeah, duh. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Or it's like if monogamy was how our
was so
ancestors,
natural for us.
Yeah,
Why is
lived their
it
life.
so fucking hard for us
Yeah.
to live that way?
Yeah. It's like, why is it so stressful? Why are we always like competing, or like why are we always like suppressing urges and desires? Like,
Yeah.
if we had really been living this relationship form for like thousands of years, if not longer, like shouldn't we have evolved and adapted
Yes.
by now to
Exactly.
to be able to like not be stressed out or like
Exactly.
worried about it?
If you know that having sex with somebody other than your partner means you could possibly die and you still do it?
Yeah.
Hello? Like,
Oh yeah, they say that, and like also like politicians and like
Yeah.
people who have like so much on the line. Like, why are they?
yeah.
Why are
they
they
still having
straying?
affairs?
Yeah.
Why are they still doing it if it's so natural to be monogamous?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. Because then you're literally doing like a harmful thing to yourself.
Yeah. You know what the consequences are. You know it's going to be
well,
bad, and yet you
And
still
you're stepping
do
outside
it.
the bounds of like your normal desire. So it's like
Yeah.
that's like people take the path of least resistance, not of like most resistance. That'd
Exactly.
be the path of most resistance.
Yeah.
Going against your nature and doing something to like destroy your reputation.
Yeah.
So
And
it's like,
yet
that
it
doesn't kinda line.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
So crazy. All right. That is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We clearly had a lot of fun with this one. And the next one, we get into penis size and orgasms. It's really freaking great. And it's definitely like the most fun I think we've had with any episode. I mean, we have a lot of fun in most episodes, but this next one is definitely one of the best. So, yeah, if you've been liking these episodes, like, let us know. Shoot me a message on Instagram and tell me, like, if you've been feeling this or if you're like, nah, this isn't interesting. But I highly doubt you would think that. Yeah, and if you've been enjoying it, as always, please rate and review the podcast. It really means a lot to us, and does so much for the show. All right, I think that's it for this week, and stick around for the last part of the series.